Hello, YouTubers and NFL fans everywhere. This is Matt, the NFL Fanatic, giving you my 2020-2021 NFL season wrap-up video. Well, it is a very sad time because after this past Sunday, the 2020 NFL season has officially concluded with Super Bowl 55 ending this past Sunday, where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, in an upset, beat the Kansas City Chiefs 31-9, giving the Tampa Bay Buccaneers their second Super Bowl, the first one since 2002, and the Chiefs become the third team, or it was like the third team to, as the defending Super Bowl champions, lose the next time. Lose the following year. And it keeps the NFL streak alive of having no repeat back-to-back Super Bowl champions since the 2003-2004 New England Patriots, led by Tom Brady, who just won this current Super Bowl to get his 7th championship. And what a Super Bowl it was. I was stunned about how the game ended up playing out. Like, I had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers winning, and I'm happy that I chose the Super Bowl winner, and that was the underdog. I saw on a majority of websites and picking aficionados that most people had the Chiefs. I took the Bucs, and I did not think it was going to be a blowout victory. I thought it was going to be a 30 point game, shootout game, to where I thought Tom Brady and the Bucs offense was going to have the ball last, and they were going to come down and maybe kick a field goal by Ryan Suckup, Mr. Irrelevant. No, but it was a dominating game from essentially the middle of the first quarter on. I thought the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, Todd Bowles, round of applause. He deserves his roses. He gets all the applause and most of the credit. Because what that defense was able to do, they caused Patrick Mahomes to run in the pocket. This was an NFL next-gen stat. 497 yards in the pocket. That is incredible because I'm pretty sure that is the most arrests the Kansas City offensive line has given up the entire year, and in the entire time Patrick Mahomes has played quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs. And he just could not get out of his own way. And he made some incredible throws from the angles. The one falling down, the Tyreek Hill, was just absolutely incredible because he was basically almost doing the worm. And he threw the ball and hit Tyreek Hill in the face mask. Travis Kelce had a few drops, but it was just one of those instances to where Patrick Mahomes, the Bucs punched the Chiefs' offense in the face, and the Chiefs didn't have a counterpunch. I actually thought in the beginning Mahomes, he was figuring it out because he was running up the sidelines left or right to get a first down, and I thought maybe that was just how he was going to be able to keep the game going, but it wasn't. And I was just thoroughly impressed and stunned by how dominant the Bucs' defensive line was. The secondary did a great job, and for the first time in Patrick Mahomes' entire career in the NFL, he did not score a touchdown. Harrison Butker was the most impressive player of the game because he was the entire Chiefs' offense. And if you look at what else happened, when you look at the Bucs, I thought it was just very telling as well that Travis Kelce, who had 133 yards, he had a great game. He had a Travis Kelce standard, if not a little above average game, but nobody's going to care about that. Nobody is going to look at that game and go, wow, Travis Kelce did something. No, he had his most irrelevant, impressive game of his entire career. 133 yards on 10 receptions. And when you look at what it means for Tampa Bay, Leonard Fournette having almost 130 yards plus from scrimmage. Rob Gronkowski getting 2 touchdown passes, the first 2 touchdown passes to Tom Brady. It pretty much just tells you right there. Antonio Brown, he got the touchdown, the 1 yard off of Tyrann Mathieu. What it pretty much tells you right there is all 31 points. They said this on the broadcast. All 31 points of the Bucs offense was scored by free agents that in the 2019 season, just a year ago, were not there. That's impressive to me. I think it's a testament to how the Bucs management and primarily Tom Brady, they put all their chips into this year, and they got exactly what they wanted. I don't think anybody thought, that this was going to, be how Brady's first year as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer was going to end, maybe besides him, because he apparently texted every one of his teammates over the past week saying that we will win. And job well done to them. I'm going to give Bruce Arians a lot of credit. I am a big Bruce Arians fan. I love his personality. I love how much accountability he holds to his players. And I thought the Bucs, really after the bye, after getting beat by the Chiefs in Tampa, 27-24, they really started to. They took that bye week at the end. They recalibrated. They put more of Tom Brady's running and play action into the offense, and the team hadn't lost. The team has not lost since. So job well done there. And here, I have some thoughts on what I already was talking about the GOAT conversation and what this means for Tom Brady. Tom Brady, for quarterbacks, I believe he is the GOAT, and I'm not going to say that, let's say Patrick Mahomes, he's 25, heck, he's younger than I am, he still has a chance, a very tiny chance to get himself into that conversation. He would need to win at least 5 or, at least 4 or 5 more titles to make that argument. If let's say next year they play each other again, and if Tom Brady and the Bucs for the second straight year beat the Chiefs, then at that point there's no way. Then at that point, Patrick, is just, he can be one of the greatest, maybe even number 2, or maybe not 2, because I'll give Montana as 4-0, like the 3rd best quarterback of all time. He could get to that, but that would be it, because I feel like Joe and Brady would have such greater resumes in the 2 losses, and what Mahomes would have to do, I don't think that could be reached. But I will say this, I think one of the more impressive and astounding storylines that people, that I thought of as the last couple of days have went on, was that for the 2021 Hall of Fame class, first of all, congratulations to Bill Nunn, John Lynch, Calvin Johnson, Alan Faneca, Charles Woodson, Drew Pearson, Tom Flores, and Peyton Manning. Congratulations to all those 2021 nominees. I'm really happy for Tom Flores. He should have been a Hall of Fame. Tom Flores and Drew Pearson should have been Hall of Famers when they were eligible. That's the end of the story there. I do not understand how Tom Flores and Drew Pearson had to wait till the senior committees to make the Hall of Fame. And for John Lynch, this is a funny story. I have been pounding to my friends and others that have talked to me that John Lynch has been a Hall of Famer for at least the past 3 or 4 years, and every year either Ed Reed, Troy Polamalu, or somebody else came up, and especially with how he's been running the Niners, he's been a bit overrated as a general manager. Just have to say that. So I kind of, out of frustration for how bad he's been running the Niners, I did not vouch for him this year, and he made the Hall of Fame this year. So, of course, as soon as I stop vouching for it, he makes it. But this is a point that I think it just kind of accentuates how great Tom Brady is. Okay, Peyton Manning is going into the Hall of Fame this coming August. That means Peyton Manning has been retired for at least 5 seasons or 6 years. Since 2016. So let's just put that in perspective. 2016. So Brady's 43. So at the age of 37, when Peyton retired, Tom Brady has won more Super Bowl, he has won more Super Bowls, been to as many Super Bowls, and has dominated in that fashion in the last 6 years. Think about that. Then Peyton Manning going into the Hall of Fame. At 43 years old, Tom Brady won his 7th Super Bowl, or won another Super Bowl, while his biggest rival is going into the Hall of Fame. And Tom Brady in 6 years, you could take out the first 15 years of Tom Brady's entire career. Make sure it didn't happen. Let's say Tom Brady, in an odd way, got picked up by New England, kind of in the same way. He's a 37-year-old journeyman that nobody knew. He could have started his career in the last 6 years when Manning left. And if you told somebody, oh yeah, there's going to be this guy that, in 6 years could do just as much, if not more than Peyton Manning did in his entire career once he retired. That's what Tom Brady's done the last 6 years. To me, that's like one of the most staggering things about what Brady did with looking at Manning going into the Hall of Fame. Peyton's already retired. He's set. He's good. But the fact that Tom Brady was able to win another Super Bowl after Peyton's career ended, and he's won more Super Bowls than Peyton's entire career after Manning left, just, baffles the mind. And, look, and people want to talk about, the conversation of, who is Tom Brady the greatest sports team athlete of all time? I don't, I don't know if you could say that, because I do think, you have Bill Russell, the most accomplished winner. And you have Bill Russell, and you have all the 1920s, 30s Yankees. But I will say this, from my own opinion. Two of the athletes that a lot of people like to talk about, kind of in predominant, basketball terms, is, Michael Jordan and LeBron James. I think Tom Brady's career and as an athlete, he's better than both of them. And I actually think LeBron, and this one, I think it's a bit disrespectful to say LeBron James is as good as Tom Brady. I think Tom Brady's career, he is so much better than LeBron. Okay, if you're talking about athleticism, yeah, then it's the opposite way around. LeBron's LeBron's probably the greatest athletic build and greatest pure athlete the world maybe has ever seen. But I don't look at athlete in terms of just pure athleticism. There has to be, to me, I'm more of an accomplishment person in sports compared to athletic ability in sports. And Tom Brady's accomplishments, from the multiple MVPs, the multiple amount of season. I know LeBron's in his 18th year now, and LeBron could be playing for, another 5 years himself. It's unparalleled. Like, basically, you could argue they're both going to have the same amount of yards and completions and attempts and points and assists. And I know you could say, well, LeBron plays defense and he's done a great job there. Sure, get all that. But I look at the fact that Tom has won more consistently. He has won more championship games. They both have went to the same amount of finals. And if it comes down to it, you have LeBron at 4-6 versus Tom at 7-3 in the finals in their biggest moments. And that's where that closes. Michael Jordan is much closer, in my opinion, if you look at it in the way of where, with Jordan, it's 6-0, 7-3. I think the difference is I think Brady has one more ring, and Tom, at his age, compared to Jordan, and at the end of his career, Tom was still being a very good, if not elite athlete at his position compared to Michael Jordan when he was with the Wizards. He was still good with the Wizards, and he still had some nice moments, but the Wizards were nowhere near as successful as he was with the Bulls back in his 90s run, or back in the 90s. So I would say Tom is better than both of those guys as athletes. Bill Russell and all the Yankees, that I don't know. That's debatable. But there's my 2 cents there. But what a fantastic Super Bowl. Let me give everybody a quick final recap of how I did for this entire season with my picks. So obviously I won both against the spread and straight up with the Super Bowl. The Bucs were the underdog, and the Bucs I took outright. So my overall postseason record this year, I went 8-4-1 against the spread, which equals 65.4%. And straight up, I did one better at 9-4 due to the Bucs winning against the Washington football team. So I went 9-4 straight up, so that equals 69.2%. And overall for the year, I went 134, 127-8 against the spread, which equals 51.3%. And straight up, I went 180, 88-1, which equals 67.1%. So my against the spread record for the year, I did just around what I do, last few years, a little bit over 50%. I would like to next year, over the next couple, as I keep doing this, to get up to 55 to 57% against the spread. That would be pretty good. That would be able to give you, a bit of a better winning idea. And that's usually, from what I've heard from a lot of websites, that's kind of like what a good against the spread person with the football picks would do. And straight up, this has been one of my best years. 67.1%. That's a little bit above my average. There were a lot of great games that I was able to get, and there were also plenty of games. And I think a lot, and I will say this throughout the entire season, a lot of my losses, amazingly, will come down to bad coaching decisions and bad kicking. Seriously, there are so many bad coaching decisions, and there are so many bad kicks that I will literally look back and go, that's how I got most of my 88 losses. In a weird way. But let me talk about the entire season and what a wild 2020 season it was, just from top to bottom. Especially everything that went on from, obviously, the entire world still dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, and we had no OTAs, we had no actual in-person physical OTAs or mini camps or training camp or preseason. We didn't even get the Hall of Fame ceremony from the 2020 class. And this season, it was wild to see a lot of stadiums bare. You had empty stadiums with, all these players out there giving it their all. There were some that allowed a smattering of fans by the late part of the season, definitely by the end. And it was stunning to see. Just how, and it was weird at first, but then you actually got to hear the audio kind of in a cool way that, like, on the field that you couldn't before. And also, I feel like, in a way, it gave you the best way of looking at ability, because there was very little crowd noise, if any at all. But looking at how the league, one of the things that I think everybody was surprised with, like, when you look at the Jaguars, they're the number 1 overall pick. The Jaguars, everybody thought they could have been an 0-16 football team. The Colts lost the AFC South, just mind you, off of week 1, looking back at the entire season. They were tied with the Titans due to the record, and they split games, and just due to the Packers beating the Titans and the Colts beating the Packers. But the one game that the AFC South came to was in week 1 against the Jaguars. And to me, that's just stunning that one game determined the entire division, and the Jaguars did not win a game from that moment on. And you look at what the Jags were not able to do. They had a couple okay pieces, Miles Jack, Joe Schobert, and James Robinson, the running back who I thought was really good. He was an undrafted guy out of, I think, Illinois. And he was the bright spot, because I believe he was 4th in the league in rushing. But the Jags, besides that, were just nowhere near competitive and just trying to get wins. They were competitive in games, and they had moments like against the Vikings, against the Titans in week 2, against the Browns, where they were competitive and they made you feel like, okay, maybe they'd get another win. But there was just always something that they were able to kind of, bounce forward from or get held back from to get them to 1-15. When you look at teams like the Jets, there's a great team out there, and I think it was the 1970 Eagles that kind of remind you of what happened with O.J. Simpson. So, let's see here. Let me look this up, and I'll... let's see. He was drafted in 1969 with the number 1 overall pick. The Philadelphia Eagles in 1969. And I the only reason why I know this is I watched a top 10 video, and Ray Dittinger did this video. So, the 1969 Philadelphia Eagles, at the time, let's see here, they went, or they had this moment where they were like 1-4, and they were on the verge of getting O.J. Simpson. They would go on to win 2 or 3 games at the end or during the end of the season, which knocked them out of the number 1 overall pick, which that year was O.J. Simpson, and they get a running back by the name of Leroy Keys. who nobody really cared about in Philadelphia ever since then. That's what it kind of reminds me of with the Jets. The Jets, basically, that's what they did. They they had Trevor Lawrence in their hands the entire year. The Jets were the worst offensive team, worst defensive team. They had receivers hurt. Quentin Williams was really the only bright spot. They cut Tremaine Johnson, the expensive cornerback they got from the Rams. And they had Frank Gore. They had Le'Veon, who they ended up cutting, and he ended up going with the Chiefs. And they had everything until they played the Rams and the Browns, 2 playoff teams. And they won both those games, which gave them the number 2 pick, which is not a horrible thing, but it's just like OJ. It's like you could have had Trevor Lawrence, but you might end up with Zach Wilson or Justin Fields, who could be good, but probably not. And I think that's what people are going to remember the Jets for. Like, the Jets were just a horrible franchise. You know, of course, you have the Greg Williams play with the zero blitz. And Henry Ruggs running up the sideline to get the win for the Raiders in a game that they didn't deserve to win. But that's what, like, you look at the Jets, that's a crazy moment. The Jets, in the ultimate Jets thing, are 0-4 or 0-13, get to 2-13, and end up with the number 2 pick by 1 game because they ended up playing the Browns the Browns when they were ravaged by COVID and their retired receiving or was knocked out, and the Rams, who that might have been at that moment the start of where Jared Goff, who is now on the Lions due to a trade with the Rams or with the Lions from Matthew Stafford, that might have been the beginning of the end for Jared Goff right there, losing to the 0-13 New York Jets at the time. Looking at some other big storylines, of course you have to look at what went on with the Houston Texans, Deshaun Watson, having a phenomenal statistical year. Top 3 or top 5 in most every quarterback statistic. Playing out of his mind, putting the Texans on his back, but only getting 4 wins out of the ordeal. They had to deal with a lot of injuries on their defensive line. They had to deal with some suspensions of Will Fuller and Bradley Roby by the end. They really didn't use their tight ends that well, and their offensive line was in shambles. And again, they paid Laramie Tunsil, the highest paid left tackle, way too much money for an overrated average tackle left tackle at best. And now, when you look at other teams, like looking kind of a great parallel with the Texans, the Bengals. The Bengals year was one that you could call an incomplete. The Bengals defense really didn't have a lot of great moments. They kept getting bum rushed pretty bad, and their number 1 overall pick, Joe Burrow, who I thought had a good statistical year, and he had the very nice moment against the Tennessee Titans when Titans were one of the hottest teams. But then, of course, against Washington, he tears his ACL. He was out for the rest of the year, and then they had to have Brandon Allen and Ryan Finley take over for the rest of the year. Even though I do have to give the Bengals their Super Bowl credit, Ryan Finley beating the Pittsburgh Steelers on Monday Night Football, and I believe Week 15 was probably their Super Bowl, and that was Zach Taylor's most impressive victory. But at the same time, Zach Taylor is still on the Cincinnati Bengals, and that just does not make any sense to me. And I understand Mike Brown's a cheapskate, and he just doesn't want to, give up money. But it's basically saying to people that we're angry about Marvin Lewis. I have to give Marvin Lewis his credit. At least the Bengals under Marvin Lewis were at least 500 his first couple years. At least they were better, and you could justify him staying around. Having 6 wins in 2 years is not good enough for me to have him, stay around. And then let me talk about the NFC East very quickly from top to bottom. The most inspiring and impressive thing that the NFC East provided was that Ron Rivera's cancer battle. That's just, I'm going to be honest. When you look at for his story and his battle with beating cancer, job well done to him. That's the best story. He and Alex Smith in the entire NFC East had the best stories out of the entire year for that division. Ron Rivera, the coach, on the other hand, the person, job well done. The coach, on the other hand, he had a very up and down year. starting with Dwayne Haskins, and then of course they benched him after 4 games. And then they brought in Kyle Allen. Then he played himself into a ankle injury that knocked him out for the year. And then you got an Alex Smith who played decent football for Alex Smith standards for what he had around him, only having 2 legitimate weapons in Terry McLaurin and Logan Thomas as his receiving options. The offensive line, they had to trade away Trent Williams to the 49ers for a 4th rounder. And their best offensive lineman, Sheriff, missed some time with a knee injury. And looking at what Washington did, and then by the end, Alex Smith hurt his calf, and he couldn't even play in the wild card game, which was led by Taylor Heineke, who, by the way, just I heard today, was given a 2-year contract extension with the Washington football team. So good job for Mr. Heineke. Maybe he can have a Heineken to celebrate his new contract. But besides that for Washington, the best thing that they had was their defensive line, with how dominant they were, how consistent they were. Chase Young winning the Defensive Rookie of the Year. Job well done to him. Fun fact, in 4 of the past 5 seasons, the Defensive Rookie of the Year has been a defensive player from The Ohio State University. So congrats to The Ohio State for getting that distinction. But then the rest of the NFC East was just dysfunction, injuries, horrible play, awkward coaching, bad quarterback play, injured quarterback play, benched quarterback play, and everything in between. And honestly, when you look at the Giants, Joe Judge, who I was a big fan of, and I started to, buy into just how bad the whole division was. I thought he was being one of the best coaches. He had gone on a good roll. He had beat the Seahawks with Colt McCoy at quarterback. And I remember I took the Giants to beat the Cardinals. That was one of my worst picks of the year because the Cardinals ended up playing really well. And beating them, I think it was 22-7. Like Daniel Jones fumbled 3 or 4 more times. He's led the league in fumbles since he's been in the league. And then by the end, the Giants they got destroyed by the Browns. And they were able to beat the Cowboys in kind of an awkward game. But there was also just a horrible missed call by Mike McCarthy that gave Graham Gano a 50-yard field goal to give him the 4-point win. And I just look at the Giants now and go, okay, could they win the division? Maybe. Especially with everything going on in the division, you don't know. But then, so there was the Giants for you in a nutshell. And they deal, of course, Saquon Barkley in week 2 against Chicago Bears, tearing his ACL. That was significant. And you look at how with the Giants that their defense played really well. Patrick Graham got an extension from the Giants management. Job, well deserved for him. But I look at the NFC East, entire year, and I just see a lot of anger, a lot of dysfunction, a lot of bad cap situations, a lot of change coming at quarterbacks for most of the teams. And I just think that division is pretty much going to end up in the same spot it was this year. Somebody's going to have to make the playoffs from that division. It's going to be the division winner, but I just don't see how any of those teams improve with what their current situations are looking at right now in a lot of different ways. And then just looking at the season, there was just a lot of mediocre teams. Like a lot of mediocrity. Like you look at the great example, the Broncos. A lot of people had high expectations for Drew Lock and the Broncos. And I did a little bit too, but then Drew Lock against the Titans got gypped by Gostowski in week 1, having his worst game as a pro, and then he ends up kicking the 1 field goal out of the 40 he tried to win the game. And then he gets hurt in week 2, and then they have Jeff Driscoll and Billy Ripien, and it's just a bunch of bad, mediocre play. And then Drew Lock comes back in, and he just doesn't get any better. He gets worse. He has the 4-interception game against the Raiders. And I just look at the Broncos, and I'm looking at Vic Fangio, and I'm like, look, man, you've had 2 years, and this team is actually, I think, statistically worse than it was the year before in terms of record in a lot of other ways. But it was always weird with the Broncos this year because it always felt like at the one time Fangio needed a win, he got it. He beat the Jets, nobody cares. But when they played the Pats, when Cam Newton came back from COVID, they got that win. He had the 17-point comeback against the Chargers. Got that win. He had the big game where Fitzpatrick and Tua, Tua has his, lowest game as a pro up to that point. Tua gets pulled by Flores, Fitzpatrick comes in, and the Broncos win that one. Then you had the Broncos-Panthers game. It's like every time Fangio needed a win to kind of maybe give Elway some hope, he was able to get one. But I still think, everything going around, they have A.J. Boye out for a couple more games. Von Miller probably might not be back. They may try to trade him. Jarrell Casey's getting up there in age. They have Sutton, who is a decent receiver but is injury prone. Noah Fant with an ankle injury. There's a lot of questions in Denver. And with John Elway giving up his general manager duties to, I believe, George Patton, the former Vikings assistant general manager, I just don't see the Broncos going anywhere. When you look at the Carolina Panthers of Matt Rule. The Panthers, I thought, this year, they were a respectable team, but and I'll give Matt Rule a pass, but there was a lot of choking from the Carolina Panthers staff and David Tepper, who was big into analytics. That was really bad. That was not what you needed to see. A lot of close losses to the Vikings, to the Chiefs, to the Saints. Trying to think, the Broncos. There were a lot of one-score losses. And to me, the guy that I'm going to blame is the $60 million coach, primarily Matt Rule. Because that close games, and I will tell this to anybody, the closer the score is, the more it goes on the coaching staff to me, not the players. If you have a lot of injuries or a lot of ups and downs, get blown out. Because then at that point, what I will say is, well, you couldn't coach what was out there. Obviously. The talent was bare. You were on your second or third string people. You couldn't hold up. That's not on you, the coach. That's on the lack of talent you had. But looking at the Panthers, that's what I'm going to remember. Look, are they a good team? Yes. Did they get, a few nice wins? Sure. They beat Washington, that I think that was their last impressive win. They beat Atlanta. They beat Atlanta in Dan Quinn's final game. And I think the Panthers, they have some decent pieces. I like Derek Brown. I like Chin. I like Brian Burns. McCaffrey's always solid. DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson. Robbie Anderson had a good year for them. But from one thing I heard, they do not believe in Teddy Bridgewater because apparently Teddy Bridgewater was given, he was a trade asset for Matt Stafford for the Lions. Apparently when the Panthers tried to get Matt Stafford. So they are going to be in a quarterback situation. I believe that Trey Lance probably wanted to go into the Carolina Panthers as their new quarterback prospect. But I will say this, good luck because there hasn't been anybody from North Dakota State that I've seen that hasn't failed so far. And sorry, Eagle fans, you can get at me, but it's the truth. And I have to pay for that a little bit as well because I have a bunch of shirts. But I digress. So I think for the Panthers, they have a good core. They have some good cap space. But their next goal is, depending on the season, to get 8 or 9 wins. That's their goal. They're not going to be a Super Bowl team. They're not going to be even, I think, a playoff team in the NFC. But I do think getting 8 or 9 wins will be good enough. And let me see here. Some more mediocre teams. Let me talk about the Raiders season. Okay, John Gruden and the Raiders. It's a constant. They're becoming like the AFC. They're becoming the AFC Cowboys. To where every year, like the Raiders, are they playing at a better level than they did after Gruden left and after Cal Hamilton? Yeah, they're playing at a more respectable level. Like that you can go through the entire year now and go, okay, they can be a 7 to 9 win team. They're going to be in a lot of games. Like I said before, they beat the Chiefs earlier in the year. They beat the Saints and the Chiefs. Yeah, they beat the Saints and the Chiefs this year. They beat one they beat them on the road, and the other they beat at home, and the other time at home for the Chiefs, it came down to Patrick Mahomes, throwing that wide open touchdown pass to Travis Kelce in the left center of the field. And they won 35-31. And I remember everybody was raving about Derek Carr and the Raiders' performance after that, saying that Gruden had worked with Carr. And now you hear reports now, oh yeah, now the Raiders are willing to trade Derek Carr, or they're getting calls for Derek Carr, and they're not shying away from him. And they're even getting calls for Marcus Mariota, their backup quarterback, who only had one decent game against the Los Angeles Chargers after Carr pulled his groin. And it just, I think with the Raiders, the frustration is that they have no defense. John Gruden's an offensive mind. And they had to fire Paul Gunther in the middle of the season after getting blown out by the Colts. And it's just like, to me, like, I look at the Raiders and go, look, you have some decent, offensive weapons. You have a top 5 tight end in Darren Waller. You have a decent offensive line with Trent Brown, who was able to, he had its ups and downs. You have Richie Incognito, who had to go down with an injury. You have Gabe Jackson. You have a decent offensive line around you. And you have Ruggs. Nelson Aguilar was one of the big surprises for a lot of people this year. He actually played like a decent wide receiver for the first time in his career. But the defense, besides Max Crosby and Jonathan Abram, I really can't think of any other solid Raiders defensive player that you had free agent-wise or talent. Hankins, Arden Key, you had Eric Harris, I thought was okay. But you have Trayvon Mullen, you have a lot of rookies and just a lot of mediocre talent on your defensive lines that could not generate a lot of pressure. And it just felt like by the end of the year, like it was like John Gruden's teams collapsed. They collapsed against the Chargers when Herbert was able to drive down the field in overtime in the last few seconds. The Ryan Fitzpatrick Hail Mary where he throws it to Mac Hollins when they bust a cover 2 coverage and let Mac Hollins run behind the cornerback where Fitzpatrick's face mask is even getting pulled to give Jason Sanders a 40-plus yard field goal for a victory. And I just look at the Raiders and go, like, look, this year they need to get at least 9 wins. If they get the 16 or 17 game season, no matter what, a 9-win season has to be the goal, at least for John Gruden to keep his job, because I feel like if he goes 8-9 or 8-8, if he has another average season, he should be fired. Like, I defended him getting there after year 1, or when he first got there, because I thought he was a better coach than Jack Del Rio, and I will still say he is a better football coach than Jack Del Rio. But after 3 years of 4-12, 7-9, and 8-8, it's been too long. He's making $10 million a year. He's got $70 more million to have to pay. And this is not the production I want from a 10-year commitment. Again, I would never give him a 10-year commitment, but this is not production that is worth nearly the price you are paying him. And then one more mediocre team. Let me talk about the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings this year, they scaled back a lot. They lost a lot of defensive pieces. Daniil Hunter then went down to a neck injury. They had Xavier Rhodes get cut. They had Linval Joseph leave. They had Anthony Barr get hurt with a pectoral injury. They had Stephon Diggs get traded. They had a lot of moving pieces they had to deal with. However, my biggest problem with the Vikings is that they're just bad. I mean, I'm just like, and Chad, sorry, but like this is a team that Mike Zimmer, he somehow still gets to keep a job after just fluctuating throughout his whole career. He's missed the playoffs 4 of his 7 years there. And Mike Zimmer, like, nobody puts any heat on him. Nobody says, hey, they need to fire Mike Zimmer. You need to fire Mike Zimmer. The man is an overrated head coach that, I wouldn't even put him on an interview board. Look, you're taking a guy that's missed the playoffs 4 to 7 years? Really? And, and they brought in Kirk Cousins, who did Kirk Cousins things. He puts up, decent statistical numbers, but no wins to show for it. And now they have to find a new offensive coordinator. Or they did. They hired Clint Kubiak. They hired Gary's son. So basically, they went internally. Clint gets his promotion. He gets his dad's job. So, okay, so you know what? So everybody, look out. He's a Sean McVay type. He's got a good father name. His father was a great coach, great head coach, guy that's connected all. Look out, everybody. Next year, Clint Kubiak, if he can get it right, he'll be a great head coach. Just look at, how Sean McVay's doing. And this isn't anything Sean McVay. I like Sean McVay a lot, but yeah, I just look at the Vikings season and go, there's not a lot you can do there. Like, Justin Jefferson was the bright spot. Probably obviously the second best offensive rookie behind Herbert, but there was really just a lot of frustration and sadness. The Saints game where Alvin Kamara scores 6 touchdowns and Mike Zimmer just goes up to the podium afterward and says, I've never had a bad defense, and then he says, I had a bad defense this year. That was pretty much the summing up of the Viking season right there. Let me see here. I talked about and finally, the two teams, and I will say this to anybody that is looking for any hope or any dark horse picks, take the Falcons or the Chargers as a dark horse Super Bowl pick. Just free advice out there. Like, okay, because for a lot of people out there, those fan bases have had to deal with a lot over the last few years. Just looking at the talent, looking at the very good quarterbacks, looking at the built rosters, the good general managing staffs, and the fact that they consistently, every week, are in games to the bitter end. And then they just choke them in like the saddest ways possible, or they just can't muster up anything. Or they can have a 17-point lead against Tampa Bay, and then they blow it. Or they can have Young Ho Koo, the Pro Bowl kicker, miss a game-winning field goal to beat the AFC champions. Or the Chargers having 17-point leads against the Saints, the Broncos, and the Bucks, and then choking them all away. There is so much missed potential with the Falcons and Chargers, and I am so happy, for Dan Quinn. And again, Dan Quinn should have been fired, you could argue, the year before. Maybe, but definitely maybe after the Cowboy game when he, had the boneheaded play of the year with the onside kick of where you had 4 Falcons just look at the ball and went 10.1 yards, and the Cowboys took the ball, and Greg Zuerlein ended up winning the game. And the Chargers, look, they kind of got it together by the end. They won 4 straight games. I think they won 3 straight one-possession games, which was weird, for Charger fans to realize, hey, we could close games. It wasn't enough for Anthony Lynn, but now Brandon Staley has that job. Good luck with that. I think he will do a good job. But if you want any dark horse Super Bowl teams, take those 2 teams with those new coaching staffs. I believe in the Chargers staff more than I do the Falcon staff. Just because Arthur Smith, he's a guy that had Derrick Henry, and he really relied on Derrick Henry. Matt Ryan's better than Matt Ryan's just as good as Ryan Tannehill at this point. He's not a little bit behind. But if they don't have a running game, who knows how good Arthur Smith is. But Brandon Staley, he's got a good enough offensive herd and those weapons. You can get a decent offensive coordinator to run it. They'll be okay. If he can stir up that defensive help with Derwin James, Melvin Ingram, Joey Bosa, Nazir Adderley, Jerry Tillery, that Charger team should be a very good team. And I think the best team to rival the Chiefs going into next year. When you look at the playoff teams, I'll go over this quickly and then I'll give my Super Bowl prediction and the video. The Colts, good bounce back year, very good offensive line, best in the league. The defense, Matt Eberflus, next, he should start getting some more head coaching interviews. He has done a great job over the last couple years, or especially this year, with that Colts defense. He's a defensive mind that I would like to see getting opportunities for a head coaching job. And as long as he keeps getting good defensive talent, he will continue to build his resume. Marlon Mack in week 2 tore his Achilles, but that's okay because now Marlon Mack is either tradable or expendable with the emergence of former Wisconsin running back, a second-round pick this year, Jonathan Taylor, who was sensational by the end of the year. He was getting over 100 yards per game. I think he had over 1,000 rushing yards. I think he broke the single-game rookie record in the game against Jacksonville in week 17. And the Colts, look, they have a good staff. They have a good management system, and they have the second most cap space going into this year. Though with Phillip Rivers' retirement, it definitely gives you an interesting perspective to see how this team is going to move forward. I think they're going to get Carson Wentz. If not, they should, I think, draft a quarterback because I don't think you want Jacob Eason with Jacoby Brissett being a free agent as your only quarterback option. I think the Colts, look, great. They're built from the inside out. I love the offensive and defensive lines for both squads. Forrest Buckner was a beast this year. Should have been an all-pro, but was snubbed. And I think the Colts, they're going to be in a good spot if they find a good enough quarterback. If they don't, they could be, a 7-9 win team, which maybe get them in the playoffs, but probably not. When you look at the Bears squad this year was a tale of solid defense, but just the quarterback switching from Nick Foles to Mitch Trubisky will kind of primarily be the story. I think that it was smart enough for Nagy to make both switches, but I think after looking at how bad Nick Foles played, it kind of makes you question why Trubisky was in there the whole time. And over the Bears, they were able to win 3 or 4 straight games at the end. I remember they beat the Jags, they beat the Vikings, and I forget the other team. They lost to the Lions. They got blown out by the Packers and got decisively beaten by the Saints in the wild card round, 24-9. The key play of the game was, of course, I think, the flea flicker from Trubisky to Wims. That the very next week the Saints executed very well with Winston throwing it to Traquan Smith. And I just look at the Bears and go, they're going to be in the Carson Wentz sweepstakes. Well, from what I've heard, I know John DeFilippo, the former quarterback coach of Philadelphia, is now the offensive assistant, the passing coordinator in Chicago. I don't know how the Bears are going to, I don't know how the Bears are going to move forward. I just feel like, again, this is a huge risk where Matt Nagy, he has to win a playoff game next year, I feel like, in order to keep his job, because at that point he's just getting into Marvin Lewis territory, to where Bears fans are not going to care if he makes the playoffs every single year. You have to win some games in the playoffs just to move forward. Let's see, I'm trying to think here. The Titans, when you look at the Tennessee Titans, the Titans played well enough consistently throughout the year. Derrick Henry led the league in rushing, over 2,000 yards. Becoming the 6 or 7 person, the second Titan running back since Chris Johnson had 2,000 yards. Ryan Tannehill had a fantastic season, 33 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. A.J. Brown was playing with a knee injury the entire year. But the Titans, I think, what they showed you in the wildcard game was they are too Derrick Henry reliant. As soon as you shut down Derrick Henry, you can get the Ryan Tannehill if you have a good enough secondary, and Tannehill cannot be dependable on winning, big games with his arm. Do I think the Titans are just kind of now in kind of this mediocre situation? What I mean by that is saying Tannehill probably can continue to play at a good level, but can you get to the Super Bowl with Ryan Tannehill? I would probably say no. Because you saw them play against the Colts once, get blown out. You saw them play against the Packers, get blown out. Every big game the Titans were in, against good competition, they could not answer the bell most of the time. Do I think can they be competitive? Sure, but there's a difference between being competitive and winning those big games, and Titans just were not able to do it. When you look at the NFC West entirely, I will very quickly say that I look at how the Seahawks, they won the division. Russell Wilson had a very good year, not one of his best years, but the offensive line has really been a problem. He just voiced his concerns yesterday, or voiced his displeasure. He's been sacked 392 times over the past 9 years. That's the most in the NFL. Fun fact, Tom Brady has only been sacked 40 or more times twice in his 21-year career, and one of those years was rookie year. So in the last 20 seasons, Tom Brady's only been sacked 40 or more times once. Russell Wilson, in 8 of his 9 years, has been sacked 40-plus times, which is amazing to think about in that way. And the Seahawks, they have a lot of good offensive talent. DK, Tyler, they have Chris Carson. They had stable running backs. Unfortunately, all of them got hurt. And so that depth was able to work, but it wasn't being able to be productive. But the biggest thing they have to work on is their offensive line. Jason Myers did not miss a field goal. Quick shout out to him. Michael Dixon, I feel like they have the second best NFC punter in the league behind Johnny Hekker. So I do want to give Michael Dixon his props. But I just feel like for the Seahawks, if they can protect Russell Wilson, I think Russ can play better. Russ had a rough, second half of the year. After going through the first 6 games, throwing 4+ touchdowns, he was on pace to break Peyton's record. He ended up fizzling out and burning a lot of the other games, and the Rams game was the worst playoff game he had in his career. He had the very rare pick 6 to Darius Williams on the screen pass, even though that is the one thing about Russell Wilson. He doesn't throw a lot of picks, but when he does throw picks, they are the worst kind because they are usually pick 6s. And I feel like the Seahawks, they're going to be in contention. They just got Shane Waldorf, the passing game coordinator for the Rams, to come over. Well, I'm okay with that, but I'm like, okay, you want the Seahawks offense to become the Rams offense? Great. So now, Raheem Morris, Sean McVay will have more ideas of how to play this offense because you're basically instilling the Sean McVay type of offense. And I think the Seahawks will be a playoff team next year, and I do think they are a Super Bowl contender, but are they better than the Packers? Are they better than the Bucks? I would say not now. Not right now, not at all. And I think they're better than the Rams. That's about a 50-50 toss-up. And for the Rams' sake, the Rams, look, Brandon Staley had the best defense in the league. Aaron Donald was a beast. He won Defensive Player of the Year. I didn't think he deserved it. I thought that should have gone to T.J. Watt. But you look at the Rams, and it's a very loaded defensive team with Aaron and Jalen leading the back and front ends. They have Cam Akers, Malcolm Brown, and Darrell Henderson running backs. Their offensive line, I don't know if Whitworth's coming back, but that offensive line's going to need some help, especially with guys like Austin Blythe and J.C. Treader and those guys on the Rams offensive line, trying to be able to maintain that protection for Matt Stafford, who I said before is a new quarterback for the Los Angeles Rams. You have Woods, you have Kupp, you have Van, you have Higbee, and you have Gerald Everett. Gerald Everett I would consider trading because Gerald Everett really isn't that important. He's kind of that second tight end. He's like a O.J. Howard type of tight end that he's on the roster, but he does very little to justify him staying there. Or you could try to get somebody. You could try to get something for him because I think that you could say, well, he doesn't have as many snaps. We can give him to you for a fifth round pick. Yeah, you try to take him, especially with the Rams not having a first round pick in the next few drafts, or until 2024 at least. I do think getting an additional pick whenever they can will help them, or should help them. And I do want to say, I looked at some Super Bowl odds. The Rams are, one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the NFC to make the Super Bowl odds. I think that's a bit too high. It's slow your roll. Matt Stafford's a good quarterback. Matt Stafford's a good, talented quarterback, but he's been a bust of a winner. And I just think, again, he's been playing for 12 years. If Matt Stafford doesn't make the playoffs with this Rams team, which you could say is a very small chance he doesn't, as talented as it is, he's not better than Rodgers. He's played Aaron Rodgers several times. He only has a couple wins against him. He's played Brady. He just played Brady last year. Brady's never lost to Stafford in the Lions. He lost to the Rams, sure, but that's different. And the Niners, if they all get healthy, who knows? But they don't have any faith in Jimmy. So, good luck with that. And the Cardinals, they are the weirdest team because you could put a lot of faith in them and they will either surprise you or they'll let you down. That's what I think I saw from the Cardinals this year. A lot of great offensive talent. DeAndre, Kyler, Play of the Year, Hail Murray. Kenyon Drake had another solid year. They could get Larry back. That would be a big retirement if Larry goes. But you just look at the Cardinals and go, what can they do to improve, or can they improve as a squad? Because that's a team that has a lot of boiling pressure, but a lot of pressure. Because Cliff Kingsbury was supposed to be the Sean McVay of the Southwest. And what he's proven to be is Cliff Kingsbury, the guy that got fired at Texas Tech when he had Patrick Mahomes as quarterback. So, and then let's see, trying to think of the other few teams. The Ravens, of course, my hometown team. It's going to be a weird year. I feel like for the Ravens, it's going to be a lot of, can we get wide receivers to come? Can Lamar get better at throwing the football? Can we sign our defensive free agents? And is just running this back going to work? Because we're back at the same point I was at last year when I did this video last year. I don't care what the Ravens going to do the entire 2021 regular season. We could be 15-1 or 11-5. We make the playoffs, whatever. Until we make the playoffs and we can get into the championship game, or I can see Lamar Jackson in situations to where we cannot run the football, or he can't run the football of improvisation. Can he win a football game with his arm when we need him to? And my answer would be no. And I think that's the problem. Honestly, if we get Deshaun Watson 1-for-1 from Lamar Jackson, I would do that in a heartbeat. I know they both have one playoff win, and I know Lamar's dominated Deshaun over the last couple times. But I know one thing: Deshaun could throw a football way better than Lamar Jackson ever could. Sorry, but that's what the Ravens season has entailed. Is it fun to watch? Sure, but it just the act gets old. Once you do something fun and it's new, it gets fun. But if you keep doing it and you get less results, it just becomes dull. Just like, okay, we've seen the same song and dance. When you look at the Saints, the Saints' big question is, of course, going to be Drew Brees. With his, if he retires, this Saints team is going to be relying on Jameis Winston's hands. Good luck with that. But I do think the Saints, they are kind of that sneaky team that let's see what Sean Payton can do with Jameis Winston. Because I think Jameis' arm is actually stronger and more effective right now than Drew's. And just, can Jameis' decision-making get turned down with turnovers? If he turns down the turnovers, And that Saints team can be right in contention with just about as every other team in the NFC with the Rams, with the Seahawks, with the Packers, and the Bucks. Seriously, I think they can be just as good if Jameis turns out his turnovers. But we'll see if that happens. And they're also about $70 million over the cap, so they're going to have to make some cuts, do some big free agents or some big signings they have to make some room. So that could definitely alter the team makeup as well. The Browns, what a crazy year for Cleveland. First time in 19 years they made the playoffs. First time actually since '94 since they won a playoff game. And this Browns team, Stefanski won Coach of the Year. This Browns team has a great offensive line. They have two great running backs. They have Baker, confident. They have a receiving core. They have Odell Beckham, who I think will get traded. Believes in themselves. They have Donovan Peoples-Jones. They have Hooper. They have Bryant. They have Landry. They have Higgins. They have a good squad that feels confident, and they're going to be in a totally different situation than they've been in the last 18 years, to where people are going to have some expectations for the Browns. But I think for the Browns, it's going to be just interesting to see, can they handle this pressure? Because it was a great story when you're an underdog and everybody roots for you, and you beat the Steelers, your longtime rival. You went and beat Pittsburgh in 17 consecutive tries. In Pittsburgh, you do it, and you do it in a convincing fashion. But the one thing I'm going to see with the Browns is, can they maintain and take that success and move it forward? And let's see, last couple teams. The Steelers, great defensive run, 11-0 run that everybody's going to remember, but they cannot run the football, and the offensive line could be gutted just due to some free agency moves, and the defensive line due to some free agency moves. And the Steelers are kind of in a weird spot to where, if you're saying they're a playoff team, they're kind of on the backside of the playoffs, in my opinion, to where they can make it still, especially if Ben wants to come back and he renegotiates his $41 million cap hit. But they're not going to be able to get to the ring in the AFC, just of all the teams out there. Let's see. Bills, best year the Bills have had in a long time. Josh Allen became a top 10 quarterback, arguably top 7 or 8 quarterback this year. Stephon Diggs led the league in receiving yards. They cannot run the ball. That is one thing the Bills need to work on. They cannot run the football. Singletary and Moss did not do a darn thing that was notable. And I think for the Bills, they have a lot of consistency moving forward of how bad the AFC East is. But can they beat the Chiefs? I would say not right now. But we will see. The Packers, Aaron Rodgers had one of his best years ever. But essentially, he is becoming Peyton-like, to where the MVPs in the regular season doesn't matter. He's 1-4 in NFC Championship games, tied with Big Nav for the most NFC Championship game losses. How many more times can he keep running into this? And how many times can the Packers fans genuinely believe they can get to the Super Bowl is if Rodgers cannot win that game? And then finally, the Chiefs and Bucks. The Chiefs, they're going to run through the AFC. It was a tough year tough way to end it. But Mahomes did have a turf toe injury, and the offensive line was banged up. I think if his toe was healed and the offensive line gets everybody back and they get Damian Williams back, they'll be fine. And they should be back in this game. And the Bucks, they just started. It's the greatest, quarterback over coach story. Brady beat Belichick for year one. I think he will win that for the ending. And what a great segue for me to end my video with my Super Bowl 56 prediction. I made a Super Bowl 55 early prediction as well. I had the Chiefs and Niners at this time last year going into this one. And this year I will do the same thing. I'm going to predict a rematch of Super Bowl 55. I'm going to go with the Kansas City Chiefs playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles in February of 2022 to end the 2021 season. I just can't see any other teams being able to, in the moment, be able to beat them. I feel like the Chiefs will have a tougher road than the Bucks, but I think both these teams come back and play a rematch for the first time since the Bills-Cowboys back in the 90s. So those are my comments and picks for the whole season. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And until next season, this is Matthew Fanatic signing off. Until next time, so long.